You've heard of the Gorillaz, right? I mean, how could you not have? With hits like Clint Eastwood, Feel Good Inc., and Rhinestone Eyes, Gorillaz is a band with a whole lot of talent. With Murdoch on bass, Noodle on guitar, Russell on the drums, and Tootie on piano and vocals, the band makes a chaotic variety of electronica music. But it's not really your traditional band now, is it? In fact, the Gorillaz are animated, with art done by Jamie Hewlett. Damon Albarn makes the music itself, and together the two men have built up a whole world of lore for the semi fictional band in the past 25 years. This was originally a project to send a message during the uprising of boy bands. According to the creators, MTV had provided, quote, nothing of substance at the time. So, in 1998, the pair had begun their work, ready to shock the world with the narrative and music. The story starts like this. A boy named Murdoch Nichols lives with his abusive father and is forced to put on shows for him at his place of work. As Murdoch gets older, he decides he wants to start a band of his own, so he sells his soul to Satan. He receives the devil's base in return, and shortly after, he decides to try and start his own band. However, all of his attempts end up failing because Murdoch can't sing. In the same town Murdoch lived, a clumsy man named Stu worked at a record store. Murdoch decided he was going to rob the place, and he crashed his car into the side of the store, hitting Stu with his vehicle in the process. He injured Stu's eye and sent him into a coma. When tried for this, the court determined that instead of going to jail, Murdoch could care for Stu in his comatose state. However, Murdoch only continued to abuse Stu further, having him in the backseat of his car when he got into yet another car crash, sending Stu through the front windshield. Stu skidded across the pavement and damaged his other eye in the process. Murdoch watched as, seemingly out of nowhere, Stu stood up from the ground, staring back at him with two black eyes. Murdoch determined that this would be the lead singer for his band. He gave him the nickname 2D and took him to build Kong Studios. This is where they would write and record their own album. Now, they just needed a drummer and a guitarist. In an England record store, a man named Russell was working. The man had moved from Brooklyn after witnessing the death of his friends in a drive-by shooting where he was the only survivor. The spirit of his friends possessed him, but that didn't stop his passion for hip-hop and percussion. Murdoch kidnapped Russell and brought him back to Kong Studios, wanting him to be their drummer. Russell decided to stay, stating that the music was just too good to leave behind. Originally, 2D's girlfriend was chosen as the guitarist, but soon after they began recording, she was caught cheating on 2D with Murdoch and was kicked out of the band. In search of another guitarist, Murdoch puts an ad out in the paper. Almost immediately, a box arrived at their front door, and in the box was a young girl from Japan, equipped with a guitar and music skills like no other. Despite suffering from amnesia and only knowing how to say the word noodle, she was invited into Kong Studios to start a new life with the band. They wrote and recorded their first self-titled album and went on tour by 2001. This was the Gorillaz. The album had a lot of hits that are renowned to this day, such as 192000, Rock the House, and Clint Eastwood. The album had a handful of punk tracks that have fun vibes, like in 5/4, but I think some of the best tracks are actually the slower ones. Gorillaz have always done well with their dejected sounding music. Songs like Tomorrow Comes Today and Slow Country just feel really easy to connect to, as they harp on a feeling of emptiness. Over the course of their first tour, the band got involved with drugs and copyright issues with other bands. Due to these stresses, Murdoch and 2D got into a particularly large argument, and the band broke up for about a year and a half. In this year and a half, Kong Studios was abandoned and taken over by hippies. 2D left to go work for his dad at a fun fair, regaining the confidence he had lost under Murdoch's abuse. Murdoch was put in prison in Mexico because he had been hiring prostitutes and wasn't paying them properly.
Hey, listen, when do I get out of here? Not for a long time, my friend.
Russell traveled to go and try and make his own music. It ended up not working out for him, and in the process, the ghosts of his dead friends were exorcised from him, finally leaving him with his own thoughts. Noodle went on a trip to try and find where she had come from. She traveled back to Japan where she found her mentor. He told her that she was part of a super soldier experiment, and her mentor had wiped her memory of the experience, because everyone else who had been a part of it had died. This is where she also learned to play the guitar, as each super soldier had a unique skill, with Noodle's being music. After Noodle learns from her past, she decides to go back to Kong Studios and work on the second Gorillaz album. She finds out the hippies have been brainwashed by garbage content that had been playing over the speakers in Kong Studios. They were practically zombies, so Noodle defeated them, but was unable to stop the broadcast of content slop. She invited the band back to Kong Studios, where they returned to record their second album, Demon Days. Demon Days is a famous album. You see this cover everywhere. You can find fan art of four characters all showing their side profile for any TV show or movie. The songs on the album are all hits that the world was obsessed with upon its release. Songs like Dare, Oh Green World, Kids with Guns, and Dirty Harry all play with those gloomy lyrics, while the instrumentals layer over each other to make some of the most interesting tracks ever made. And who could forget about Feel Good Inc.? Feel Good Inc. is easily the most popular Gorillaz song. It's extremely catchy and relatable. It has a sad vibe that the Gorillaz are so well known for, and at the time of me recording this video, it has well over 1.5 billion streams. Feel Good Inc. is a song that, for lack of a better term, will never die. And when you're talking about Demon Days or the Gorillaz in general, you just can't help but mention the song. While recording a music video, a bunch of agents show up with the intention to kill Noodle because of her knowledge of the Japanese super soldier experiment. So she parachutes off of a cliff and evades them, forcing the band to break up once more. Russell and 2D part ways, and Murdoch goes on a bender, wasting all his money, so he eventually returns to Kong to burn the place to the down and collect insurance money. Eventually, Murdoch decides he wants to record a third album, so he builds another studio on an island. This is Plastic Beach. In an attempt to get the band back together, Murdoch collects DNA samples of Noodle, who is still on the run, and creates a cyborg version of her so he doesn't have to find the real one. He kidnaps 2D and traps him on the island, forcing him to make more music.
Where the bloody hell have you been?
Toilet?
Toilet? What do you mean, toilet?
He doesn't bother trying to find Russell, as he decides he can electronically make the drum part himself.
Welcome to the world of the Plastic Beach. Yeah.
Plastic Beach is an album that brings you into a new world entirely. The Plastic Beach itself is a pile of human garbage and plastic waste, painted over in an attempt to draw people into its artificial beauty. The album has a handful of fun features, like Snoop Dogg and De La Soul, and it's just a great album to vibe to. You can sit down, turn on some cool lights, and just bask in the glow of the Plastic Beach. I really like the song On Melancholy Hill, as well as Superfast Jellyfish and Empire Ants, which have one of the best track transitions I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, listen to this. Russell ends up hearing Plastic Beach, and he's both upset that he wasn't included in the recording and eager to find out if Noodle is still alive. So he goes to find out what's going on. Trying to swim to the Plastic Beach, he consumes a bunch of radioactive garbage and becomes a giant, eventually finding the real Noodle on a life raft and bringing her to the island. When they arrive, the island is under attack by a boogeyman who Murdoch was on bad terms with to begin with. Here, the band is separated again. Noodle escapes on a submarine but is eventually found by pearl divers, who start to train her as one of their own. Tootie gets swallowed by a whale, who he lives inside of until it washes up on a beach and dies. Tootie assumes he's stranded on a deserted island for a few weeks before he finds out he's actually in Guadalupe, where he parties. Russell is eventually harpooned on the edge of Japan, being mistaken for a whale. He washes up on the beach in North Korea, forced to stay there on display until he returns to his normal size. Murdoch is arrested for not following a Gorillaz recording contract, and he's told that he'll be given freedom in exchange for another album. So he goes to London to record the fourth album. Noodle sends herself to London in a FedEx box. Tootie travels there from Guadalupe, and Russell arrives after he returns to his normal size. They call the apartment Studio 13 and began recording their fourth album. Humans was the first album released by the Gorillaz in 7 years. Damon Albarn describes the album as a night where everything that you believed in was turned on its head. The album dips its toes into a lot of different genres, and it has a lot of political commentary that comes with it. It explores what the end of the world would entail, and it does so with some pretty interesting instrumentals. Humans is a dance album at the end of the day, despite its extremely serious message. I mean, you try and put on She's My Collar or Strobe Light and try not to bust a bit of a move. Be real, guys. Be real. In celebration for finally releasing an album after 7 years, Murdoch decides they want to throw a huge party, and the band begins to look for a place to hold the event. They find a house in Detroit, which they try to explore, but they're attacked by the demons that reside there.
The bath! Hey, you guys, I'm just gonna take a bath.
Eventually, they end up at a real party, where Murdoch ends up making a deal with some shady businessmen, and eventually he ends up in prison. Again. 2D ends up deciding he wants to make another album because he's feeling confident in himself, finally, for once in his life. He replaces Murdoch with Ace D. Coppola, a villain from the Powerpuff Girls. It's theorized that this was made possible because the Gorillaz and the Powerpuff Girls may actually take place in the same universe, as they have both referenced each other in their own medias several times. Although that is just a theory, because with how chaotic the Gorillaz story has been so far, really anything could be possible. Tootie had gotten this idea from Noodle, who in her childhood had really enjoyed watching the Powerpuff Girls. They ended up releasing the Now Now only a year after the release of Humans. The Now Now is a lot calmer than the rest of the Gorillaz albums, but it makes the album feel really personal. It plays with the topic of growing old and losing the things you once loved. It digs really deep into the melancholy that the Gorillaz like to make show of, and honestly, my favorite part of any Gorillaz music is those lyrics about complicated emotions, and the Now Now is full of songs that satisfy that need for me. When Murdoch hears the band put out an album without him, he decides to escape from the British prison he's locked in. Murdoch ends up trying to get information on a criminal in the same prison as him, and eventually he gets in contact with Noodle. Noodle decides that the criminal may have stolen Tootie's soul, which would explain why he's been so happy recently. This is why she chooses to follow the coordinates Murdoch gave to her to try and find him. When she finally gets there, it's not a crime den which Murdoch had told her it would be, and it's actually a wellness center. She's confused by this, so she decides to do research on why Murdoch had actually been arrested, and it turns out it was just some unpaid parking fines, not some shady business practice that they had all had thought. He was supposed to be released, but he had apparently drowned trying to escape from the sewer after he got impatient with Noodle's work. He ends up showing up to Noodle's location on the back of a yak and tells her that he is a changed man after experiencing almost dying in the sewer. He promises to try and better himself in the future, feeling remorse for his selfish and abusive past. Noodle reluctantly accepts this and brings Murdoch home with her. He finishes the tour with his bandmates, taking his place back from Ace D. Coppola. After their tours end, they took a short break before returning to work on their sixth album. The band separates, but keeps in contact, referring to the machine and talking about when it will be ready in postcards that they send to each other. They all return to Studio 13 at some point, starting up the Song Machine, which runs on chaos. The machine opens portals for the band and allows them to travel the world to collaborate with more artists. Murdoch, not having access to the portal, tries to get 2D to explain them to him, theorizing that 2D might be controlling them. He tries to drug 2D with a truth serum, but Noodle and Russell come to his rescue, and it starts a big fight. Murdoch, at this point, has had enough, and he decides to build himself an orgone accumulator in the basement of the studio, which turns bad energy into good energy when you're inside it. The band gets into a number of hijinks, including making a spaceship out of an RV and trying to capture ghosts before they finally release the album. The Song Machine is released in 2020. The peak quality of this album is its use of collaborating with such a huge variety of different artists. Artists include Elton John, Lee John, Georgia, Fatoumata Diawara, and so many more. The album is punchy and chaotic, and it showcases both the Gorillaz style and the style of each artist featured, having a new one on every song. The band, while recording the music video for their song The Lost Chord, gets sucked into another portal, and they get sent back to the plastic beach. A dreadful turnout for everyone involved. The island reminds the band of all they've been through, all the terror they've experienced, mostly at the hands of Murdoch. They're put in danger yet again as the island is attacked by a sea monster, and they all travel to the highest point to try and escape him. A portal reappears, and Tootie, Noodle, and Russell all manage to climb through, but Murdoch fails, being left behind. Until the portal reopens, with Tootie reaching his arm out to save Murdoch. A sign that Tootie may not hold a grudge for everything Murdoch has put him through. They return to Studio 13, only to have a sinkhole open up in the basement, therefore getting them all evicted. Murdoch finds them a new home in LA, where the band retreats to. This is where they will start to record their 7th studio album. Murdoch watches over the next door neighbors, insistent that Moonflower, the woman living there, is his soulmate. He is overcome with this idea that they should start a cult, which he is the leader of. Russell and Noodle reluctantly agree to join this cult with the idea that they can make the world a better place by being a part of it. Russell begins to watch the Static Channel on television, believing it has hidden answers to the prophecy their cult is creating. Soon, Murdoch and Tootie find out that their next-door neighbors are also a cult, and Tootie chooses to go over there and talk to Moonflower, who takes a particular liking to him. Murdoch begins to bathe in hot water and make what he calls the essence of Murdoch, with the intention to share it with the people who will follow him and his cult. The essence of Murdoch is a bright green color, and it's said to smell really bad, which Noodle hates, but Murdoch continues to make the serum despite this. Murdoch finds out that 2D had been talking to the other cult, and he banishes him from going to the Promised Land because of his betrayal of the group. This upsets 2D, so he goes next door to talk to Moonflower, and he is eventually kidnapped by their cult. Noodle is worried by the fact that 2D doesn't return for a few days, so she insists that they should try and find him. It takes a while to convince the other two, with Russell in a non-responsive state, so enamored by the television, and Murdoch thinking that 2D had run off out of spite. But eventually, they both are convinced that their bandmate is in danger, and they decide to try and save him. In a building beneath the Hollywood sign, 2D is about to be sacrificed by the other cult, so that way they can stay young forever. He will be fed to a monster that lives beneath the building, lowered down by a sacred wheel. His bandmates show up and try to save him, and it turns out Moonflower has a similar plan, grabbing the rope to try and stop 2D from falling into the monster's den. Through the crux of battle, a bottle of the essence of Murdoch falls from Murdoch's robe, falling into the monster's mouth below, causing him to explode, therefore saving 2D's life. The police arrive and find 2D and Russell in strange mental states, so they take them as well as Noodle to the hospital to check them out and arrest them. Meanwhile, Murdoch runs off again. He eventually shows up to the hospital, bringing his crush, Moonflower, back to life for a short period of time so he can go on a promised date with her. She dies while on the date, but keeps her ashes as the band creates new passports and runs from the police, heading off to Mumbai, where they will probably begin writing their next album. Cracker Island is an album that's easily digestible and fun to listen to. The beats are catchy, and the lyrics talk about escaping shady societal problems. Some of the tracks actually remind me of the Now Now, like The Tired Influencer and Baby Queen. It has an airy feel at times, and it's just been a really pleasant album to listen to over the past few years since it came out.
Not really big on either of those. I am rather partial to a little bit of Donna meat. But is it meat?
The Gorillaz gave us 25 years of not only music, but entertainment. Watching the shenanigans the band got into is something to look back on and appreciate. Gorillaz could make you laugh with its silly interviews and skits, but they could make you cry with their lyrics and by tugging on your heartstrings with the lore. They gave us a message to focus on what makes us enjoy life, and to ignore all the mass production in the music industry and in life in general. We should leave behind the societal unrest and man made garbage. We need to start being more realistic about the world around us. In other words,
The most important thing is listening the recording of the music. It makes them get musical sense, and that's the point of the fast progress.
Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett's work is something that will live on in the hearts of thousands of fans across the world due to their realistic approach to the depressing state of the world. So thank you to Jamin and Jamie for 25 years of melancholy, humility, and feeling good. And thank you to everyone who watched this video. I'm sorry it's been so long since my last upload. I've had this video in the works for a while now, but my computer ended up breaking, and I had a couple complications with the new one. But I finally figured it all out, and I'm so excited to get back to working on YouTube videos. I really hope you enjoyed this one, as I worked really hard on it, and, I hope you have a good day. My name's Frog, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Where the hell did that door come from? Oh, it's jammed. Why are all the doors in this dressing room jammed?